Now, I personally think that one of the interesting and valuable things about our upcoming training in March 2020 in Northampton, England, is that it is being run by myself, a therapeutic hypnotist trained in solution-focused brief therapy, and by my training partner, who is a solution-focused brief therapist trained in hypnosis. I was actually trained in solution-focused therapy prior to discovering hypnosis, and it was as I used that therapy model with families that I became increasingly interested in the power of words, in how the framing of a simple question can change someone's outlook on life. And as I looked further into that and into the history of solution-focused therapy, I discovered Milton Erickson, and then of course hypnosis and hypnotherapy. John, my training partner, who actually has the privilege of being my brother, is a university professor in social work, and he supervises and mentors a team of social workers as they use solution-focused brief therapy in their practice. And it was actually as we were discussing how a wider knowledge of Erickson's work could help some of his mentees that we first came up with this induction, based in part on the miracle question. I don't have a demonstration video of the induction just yet to show you, as it is very much a therapeutic induction and I don't tend to film my actual sessions. However, John and I have continued to use the induction for around 10 years now, so it's probably time that we shared it. I won't go into an in-depth explanation of the miracle question here or the background or so on. You can check the file in the Facebook group for a discussion if you want to, or simply Google the term. But I'm sure many of you know that in solution-focused therapy, the miracle question is less of a technique and more of a conversation starter. It is, if you like, a door opener. It's a way to begin walking down another path. And as such, it is more of a discussion that follows the conversation rather than the specific question itself that should be our focus. The miracle question invites clients to view things from a completely different perspective, and that's the perspective of their problem having been resolved. And part of that is to see the impact of the removal of the problem. That is to really understand how life, the whole of life, would look without the problem. And that's why many versions of the question invite clients to walk through their day from the moment they wake up. And that's important. It's actually hugely important. You don't just focus on the problem or even the removal of the problem, but on the change that it would make. What it would look like in the whole of one's day if the problem was resolved. So you can look at the problem or the resolution of the problem from various angles, various temporal points or time frames throughout the day. Or, more unusually, you can look at it from various physical perspectives. Now I find this really interesting because in one sense, these are less real. As we'll see with the fly on the windscreen example in a moment. But in another sense, they can feel more real because a client may have never imagined what a day with them in a good mood would look like to their children. Because currently to them that feels impossible. But they can imagine what that might look like from the side or up in the corner and so on. The usual miracle question, at least in the US, is to ask something like this. I have a rather strange question to ask you. Suppose tonight, while you slept, a miracle occurred. And the miracle was that the problem that brought you here today is resolved. But you're asleep, so you don't know that a miracle has happened. So when you wake up, what would you notice that would tell you a miracle has happened? And that's great. That's how the question came to be formulated, but it's not the only way to ask the question, or the only group of questions to ask following the question. Instead, you could simply ask in a slightly more Ericksonian and potentially hypnotic way. If I met you in 6 months and this was not a problem for you anymore, how would I know? What would I notice? Or even just something as wonderfully simple as, what would it look like if you were having a good day tomorrow? How could you tell it was a good day? And then you can follow up by asking spatial questions as well as, or instead of, temporal questions. And that's a very, very long-winded way to introduce the perspective induction. I don't know if you really think about your opening question or statement when a client comes in. Some people might ask, what seems to be the problem? However, that can reinforce the problem trance. Or how can I help you? Yeah, that could imply that you're doing the work, not the client. So someone coming from a more solution-focused position might be inclined to ask something like, what needs to be accomplished by the end of this session so you can say coming to see me was useful and meaningful? Or more simply, what's your best hope from coming here today? And with practice, you'll discover that a great many clients will completely ignore your question and begin to speak about their problem. Now, the key response there is to not be problem phobic if talking about the problem is something they need to do, but to also recognize when they are locked into a certain problem mindset and need your assistance to step beyond that. So you might often find yourself saying things like, okay, so what would you like instead? Or, and if that was not an issue, how would things be? And so on. So I'd like you to imagine a client who comes in because of a driving phobia. They had actually been sexually assaulted in the car and since then had apparently developed this phobia. And the conversation might follow as such. What do you hope to get out of this session? I mean, how will you know this has been a valuable use of your time? And they might describe not wanting to feel afraid when they drive. And you simply say, so what would you like instead? And they could talk about wanting to drive with ease or effortlessly, almost like they're in the flow. And you have them describe this in detail. Describe the scene. Don't let them just say, I'll drive without fear. Really unpack it. And then you begin to ask some slightly strange questions. If I was driving past, how would I know you were driving with ease? And you let them answer. What does that feel like? And then maybe with some kind of physical shift that implied I was going to the other side of the car, I might say, and if I was the sun shining down on you, what would give away to me that you were driving effortlessly? And as they answered, I would say, and how is that? And then building on some detail they'd given in their description of the scene earlier on, I might say, so if I was that fly on the windscreen, how would I know you were driving in the flow? And they might talk about, I don't know, their breathing, their chest going up and down, their breathing. And then you can even ask things like, so how would your breathing know you were driving relaxed, easy, effortless? And as they answered that, I could go on to speak about how would their children in the back of the car know they're relaxed as they drive today? I might even say to them, how do you know now that you are relaxed, easy, effortless? And in some ways this is a bad example because if they're driving a car, you don't want them trancing out in that kind of way. So I might associate them out of the car, I might relocate them, and as I have them close their eyes, I might invite them to think of other experiences where they felt like this. And in that other location, whether it's sitting on the beach or whatever, allow your body and mind to become thoroughly acquainted with that as you rehearse your new driving experience. This has clear similarities, I think, with the leisure induction, which is one of my proudest shares. But instead of revivifying a past experience you associate into a future one, it also has a connection to my sensory overlap induction, gradually moving round and round with different perspectives in a spiral until you kind of move inside them. Now, this isn't a basic induction as such, it's the worst to describe in an audio file. It's certainly not a, if you want to induce hypnosis, do this series of steps sort of induction. However, it is an example of how an induction can be a therapeutic process in and of itself.